The average person spends between 5 and 6 hours a day watching television. Now let's put that in perspective. That's more time than you spend doing anything else but sleeping or working. More recent figures show that the numbers have climbed. The 20-year-old has spent closer to 2 full years of his or her life in front of the television set. At the same time, the researchers have noted a disturbing phenomena. It seems that we are getting progressively more stupid. They also note a decline in reading and comprehension levels in all age groups tested. Americans read less and understand what they read less than they did 10 years ago, less than they have at any time since research began to study such things.
Any conversation on television for the past 10 years with a representative of television could open with the observation that this has probably been the worst year in the history of the medium. Now, what are your views on it, Rod? And do you see any hope for an upbeat in quality or in balance even?
Well, first of all, I'd have to make comment on the show title. In direct response, you're quite right. It seems that each succeeding year is a little less exciting than the previous, that we seem to be wallowing in a very ruddish concept here. Most noteworthy being the lack of ingenuity, the lack of new concepts, the lack of new ideas and new approaches. The fact that we should be producing, I think, a body of exciting modern literature in this marvelous new electronic media, and aren't. It's reached a point now, I guess, where when something noteworthy is on, it shines simply by virtue of comparison. Now, as to where we're going, I would like to say, hopefully, well, now let's maybe next year we'll come back with something more definitive, more responsive to intellectual taste and the like. But I've already seen the penciled-in so-called blueprint of next year's performances, and they seem like virtually carbon copy of everything we've had. 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 Good God, there's enough controversy and drama, implicit in our daily lives to warrant a dramatic approach. And indeed, they must have the continuing running character. This, I think, stems from the fact that the networks have forever thought, and indeed, they must have the continuing running character. This, I think, stems from the fact that the networks have forever thought of an audience as some kind of mongoloid personages with IQs and negative figures who cannot retain any kind of close association unless they are thrust into the maelstrom of familiar names week after week after week after week.
67 years ago, 6 million Americans became unwitting subjects in an experiment in psychological warfare. It was the night before Halloween, year 1938 at 8 p.m. The Mercury radio on air began broadcasting Orson Welles' radio adaptation of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. As is now well known, the story was presented as if it were breaking news, with bulletins so realistic that an estimated 1 million people believed the world was actually under attack by Martians.
Why aren't there comparable programs?
What about children's programming in the afternoon? At least in the early days of television, they were making an effort in that direction. The shows may not have been very good, but to abandon the field entirely in the afternoon and in the early evening. And here we are in the presence of a poet.
Well, what interests me very much about what you gentlemen are saying is that you both deplore the lack of quality on television, the lack of things that are good, or as you say, Rod, exciting and new.
Have you ever noticed what you look like while watching television? If the angle is right, you might catch your own reflection in the screen, jaw slightly open, lips relaxed into a smile, the blank stare of a television zombie. This is called soft brainwashing, ladies and gentlemen, and it's even more effective because its victims go about their lives unaware of what's being done to them.
And yet, it seems to me that the whole concept of what is good is open to question by what approach you use to it. The network officials would define as something being good as something that moves an awful lot of merchandise. Now, what is frightening about the whole situation as far as doing the kind of thing that you were talking about doing, Rod, the advertising agencies, the clients, the networks, and so on, have the whole concept of what is going to be put on television so embroiled with the profit motive that there's absolutely no way to get around.
It's baffling to merely glance at the stacks of documentation that this world government isn't being constructed for the greater good of humanity. Although there are a growing number of people waking up to the reality of our growing transparent soft cage, there seems to be just enough people who are choosing to remain asleep.
Come on. Please, sit down, Mr. Larkin.
September the 5th, 1973. A new phase in global warfare. War by example. At 4:32 our time, China took out the remote Indian border village of Bandar, unprotected by the Icarus network. After the first 2 5-megaton H-bombs had fallen, the 9-way hotline finally
switch it off.
But
this is going to happen in 1973 if you're going to make this happen?
No. We're going to make models much cheaper. Then we photograph the models.
Fake newsreels?
Fake newsreels. For the past 10 years, people have been looking at our fake newsreels and listening to our fake commentaries.
And they accept it for the truth. And you can do it. Stop 100 people in the street. How many of them have actually seen a missile or a satellite? They're just told they exist and they believe it.
The drive to dumb down the populations of Earth is a classic art that existed before the United States did, brothers and sisters. One component to understanding and deciphering the systems of control is to become a student of the magicians of influence and propaganda. In order to defeat our enemies or dictators, it's imperative that we understand how they think and what they believe in. Most of the programming on television today is programmed by the largest media corporations that have interest in defense contracts, such as Westinghouse, CBS, and General Electric of NBC. This also makes perfect sense when you see how slanted and warped the news is today.
This could be the news for 1973?
Not necessarily exactly like this. We only plan in detail 1 year ahead.
Oh, you only plan 1 year ahead.
Tell me, what is the news item that's bothered you the most in the past year, 1967?
Well, it has to be the new American intercontinental ballistic missile, the Boy Wonder, doesn't it?
Just the one I asked him to set up for you. The new ICBM, codename Boy Wonder, with a much talked about Mercury warhead. I haven't any special effects up here, but perhaps with the proper sound. Blast off. And Robert Larkin, television director, high IQ, 35 years old, is scared. Scared by nothing. It doesn't work. It's a scientific impossibility.
If this rocket doesn't work, then the others?
They have a fireworks party at Cape Kennedy almost every other day. You didn't really believe there were all these things whizzing about up there, did you? Did you? Did you? Astronauts crossing their legs for 8 days.
How long has this been going on?
Since Hiroshima.
In Vietnam, hundreds of people are being killed every week. Well, you can't do that with your models.
No. And you can't cure people of bad habits in 2 generations. They like to carry rifles, they like to put lines on maps, and we let them because we control the situation. There's no danger of world war. Just a simple choice for everybody, capitalism or communism, strawberry or vanilla. Politicians are easy to control. The grosser mentality boys who like to be photographed getting in and out of Daimlers in Whitehall. A few rungs up the ladder, there are the people in the top secret factories. Just those in a position to know they're making weapons that don't really work.
There must come a time when somebody wants to use one of those weapons.
The conflicts of interest is merely glancing at the issue. Although to understand the multiple ways that lies become truth, we need to examine the techniques of brainwashing that the networks are employing. Understand also that radio isn't any different in its ability to brainwash a population into submission.
Just
intention to rule rests with the annihilation of consciousness. We have been lulled into a trance. Please understand, they are safe as long as they are not discovered. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
They're pulling the water out of the sand like sponges.
Blow it out your ass.
I mean, somebody is standing there with a finger on the button.
Well, that's the beauty of it. Nobody presses the button. We control all the crises. We build them up and we shut them down.
So long as you're appealing to in a sense, a totally commercial entity whose job it is to move product, whose use of the media is principally and primarily as a display case for commercial goods.
The concept of television, a mass media kind of presentation such as television has something to do with the question of what you can conceive of as being the purpose of television. Do you look at it primarily as entertainment? The fellow watching a show, which he doesn't want any deep dramatic meaning, he doesn't want catharsis, he only wants to be entertained. Do you look at it as entertainment or as an art form?
That's the oft-asked, properly asked question. And in informal moments when you can buttonhole a network executive, he will say to you that indeed no. It is not the responsibility of the networks to enlighten, to educate, to lift the intellectual values and interests of a populace. Not at all. They are simply there to reflect what are the entertainment tastes of the masses. They have forever said this, not publicly, but in any private conversation, this is principally what they will say.
Are the tastes of the people so deplorable because they are not given anything better, or the shows on television deplorable because the tastes of the people are bad initially?
For I've never begged off an issue before, but I'm beginning to believe that there is a strange groundswell amongst the American populace, the citizenry, that would seek out an escape away from reality of late, that their tastes lie much toward the entertainment quality rather than the cerebral quality. It's reminiscent of television in its early days, when indeed there was certainly a race problem in those days. It wasn't out in the street. It wasn't loud in our ears. It wasn't infesting our gut, our conscious gut, as it is today. But by God, there was anguish amongst minorities then as there is now.
It wasn't loud in our ears. It wasn't infesting our gut, our conscious gut, as it is today. But by God, there was anguish amongst minorities then as there is now.
Well, you see, then you assaulted the straw men who were acceptable as minority groups. Mexicans, American Indians, Eskimos, beaten down, downtrodden peasants under the Tsar. These were the minorities, but not the Negro. But when you're talking about a bunch of cavalrymen knocking off a bunch of poor redskins and putting them into a reservation, the audience need to have no association, certainly no guilt. How many Indians have they pushed into a reservation?
Of the images I can remember from television shows, there are very, very few, because it's not intended to be memorable, most of it. It's intended to flush right out.
Right.
You see it, it has no memory value. And this is really not contributing to a person's individual being.
I've yet, for example, I keep thinking this awful thing, not to inject a political note into this, but I have a feeling we're dealing with a faceless enemy.
You say you can put out what pictures you like on television. Doesn't anybody try to stop you?
No, nobody wants to. 99.386% of the population wouldn't believe this conversation. And the rest are working for us. Most people realize that the world is controlled from about 6 big cities. But it must be rather shocking to learn that a sixth of the world is controlled from this building.
You mean you?
Oh, no. I only rate an office on the 7th floor. There are 2 other offices above this one. And a giant computer system. And what's so remarkable about that? It's just a machine that can store a vast amount of information.
A machine that knows too bloody much.
Now you're being hysterical about it. The computer's very simple. You feed data into it. Anything from the Wall Street closing prices to the North Atlantic weather.
And you get decisions. That machine's taken you over.
Scare an ostrich. Buries its head in the sand. You scare a hedgehog, it rolls itself up into a ball. When a woman's frightened, she goes out and buys herself a hat.
You mean you scare us so that we'll buy more, so that money moves quicker, production moves up?
We don't say scare when we talk about human beings. We say threaten them emotionally. And there are all sorts of ways of not just the big ones like the hydrogen bomb. Overcrowd them a little with bad planning. Sell them too many motor cars. Anything to keep them a little bit removed from reality. Nowadays, people don't work for money. They work for the idea of money.
I can go twice as high.
Most of the time, your eyes deceive you. But keep your eyes open. Because every once in a while, the world just might play a trick on you. I'll see you next time.
Thanks to everyone who has researched in the area of alternative history, a sizable amount of data has been collected that seems to indicate that a large group of people were inserted out of nowhere into a glorious pre-existing civilization. This seems to have happened around 1800 our time, give or take up to 50 years.
Oh, this is too much.